Welcome back to Professional Perspectives. I'm Marvakella and I'm here with my co-host Praneeth. We're really excited to bring you the third episode of our series. If you tuned in last time, you'll remember our conversation with Mr. McCarthy, an ASU professor who gave us some fantastic advice on navigating college. Today, we're going to be diving into the world of law.
That's right, Arav. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Mr. Hallinan. He's a third-generation trial attorney based in San Francisco, and he's the founder of the Hallinan Law Firm. Mr. Hallinan spent nearly a decade as a public defender, representing clients in high-stakes felony cases and lower-level misdemeanors. Now, he's running his own firm in California, where he continues to stand up for the rights of individuals.
Mr. Hallinan's experience as a public defender has given him a deep understanding of how the legal system works. We're looking forward to hearing about his career, the lessons he's learned, and his advice for high school students thinking about careers in law.
We're really excited to dive into his story and get some practical advice for anyone considering a future in law or just trying to navigate their own career path. So, Mr. Hallinan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Mr. Hallinan, you had a long and successful career in law, but let's take it back to high school. When did you first realize you wanted to be a lawyer, and what steps did you take early on to pursue that path?
Thanks. So, you mentioned that I'm a third generation trial attorney. And because of that, when I was in high school, even through college, the last thing I wanted to be was a lawyer because I just didn't want to do the same thing my dad did. But what happened was I graduated college. I knew I wanted to go to graduate school, but I just didn't know which career path I wanted to follow. And so I went out in the workforce. I worked in local politics in San Francisco, in the public sector and the private sector. And in that capacity, I crossed paths with a number of people who all did very diverse things amongst each other, all of whom were lawyers. And it dawned on me that being a lawyer doesn't just mean that you do one type of thing. There's so many things that you can do. Being a lawyer really opens up a lot of doors. So I decided that law school actually was the probably the best type of graduate school I could go to for me. So I went to law school, and lo and behold, once I was there, I just happened to kind of click with the criminal law. I happened to click with the same type of law that my dad did. I liked it more. I got better grades in it. It just kind of came more naturally to me. Some might, make a joke that, it's in my DNA. I don't know if that has anything to do with it. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But that's basically how I ended up on this path. So I've always said that I didn't necessarily follow in their footsteps, but I ended up in their footsteps. And my thought is wherever you end up, whatever you end up doing, you got to do it the best that you can. So lucky for me, my father, my grandfather were not just simply practitioners of law. They were, the best. I've been hearing from other people my whole life that they're, just that they were legendary. So that's kind of how I ended up where I am. When I started practicing law, my dad was close to retirement, and I didn't really want to just go work for him. I didn't think at the time I'd be able to get very good courtroom experience just doing private practice law. So that's why I became a public defender initially.
Yeah. So would you say this gave you an advantage? Because I know many high schoolers, they don't know what it's like to be a lawyer.
Yes, I'd say absolutely. But it's not that I had an advantage that you guys couldn't get. I had an advantage in the sense that I was really close with someone who would be really the perfect mentor for being, for doing what I do. So it's obviously, if your parent is that mentor, then you don't have to go out and look for them. But my point is, if you know what you want to do and you find someone who can teach you, that's where the advantage lies. So yeah, I did probably have more of an advantage in that I had a great teacher, at home already. But it's not just simply, the fact that he's my dad and, we live in the same house or what have you. It's that he was a perfect mentor. Okay, so you got to go out and find the right mentor. So if you have your eyes set on what you want to do, what you and you don't have a parent who does that, you don't have a relative or know anyone who does it, you got to just start networking. You got to reach out to people in that industry or that field, and start asking questions and start making connections and finding the right person to be that mentor. Now, what you got to remember is that I was also a public defender for 10 years. My dad was a mentor, for my first 8 months of practice when I passed the bar exam before I became a public defender. And then while I was a public defender, he was a great mentor in that we used to talk shop. I'd talk about my cases and he'd give me some advice about how to view certain things, how to approach certain things. But I worked in a big office. I had other mentors there. My dad was a huge influence on my particular practice of law, but not the only one.
So you were talking about how when you were in the political sector, you saw that everyone around you was a lawyer, or did law in law school after your undergrad. So I was wondering if you would want to go down the path of like being a politician, would you recommend taking or going to law school, or is it not really a necessity?
I'd say, well, first of all, I just want to be clear that it's not that everyone working in politics was a lawyer, not even close. But in that field, I came across a lot of different people who were lawyers. And what I mean by that is, in politics, you deal with issues of land use. That's a type of law. You deal with constitutional law, employment law, labor law. And then obviously, a district attorney is an elected official. A public defender, actually only in California and I think Florida, are elected officials. In fact, I take that back. Only in San Francisco County. That's the only county in California where they're elected. My point is, law is good to have in whatever field you go into, but the only field where it's actually required is the practice of law. Politics, you get, think of, how many politicians you know of who did something other than the practice of law, which goes to show that you don't need it to be successful in politics. But the thing about politics is that, in my opinion, what makes a good politician is someone who kind of gets to that position organically. And so if your practice of law takes you into that position, then you bring a certain approach to politics that's based in your experience as a lawyer. Having been a public defender, if I ever went into politics, I'd be motivated in large part to address poverty and address mental illness. That's something that I've seen up close in my experience as a lawyer. So I think it kind of depends on what your reason for getting into politics is. Some people are just very ambitious and always wanted to go into politics, and law is definitely not going to hurt. But I don't know if it's required.
Yeah. So you were, as you said, like you were a public defender and like you managed, poverty and all this stuff. So you managed like large caseloads and defended people from like all walks of life. So what did this teach you about like managing stress, resilience, and other challenges that high schoolers might face?
You have to be organized. I have ADHD, so organization is more of a challenge for me. And so whatever your particular challenge is, you have to, figure out what kind of systems and mechanisms do you need to implement to make sure all the work gets done. Do you have to put signs on your wall? Do you have to set reminders on your phone or your computer? Whatever the case, what you got to do is you got to know what needs to be done, and you got to figure out what it takes to make sure it gets done. Okay. And that's separate from doing a good job. Obviously, when you're doing something, you want to do the best that you can do, and you got to figure out, what is my goal? what is everything I need to do between now and accomplishing that goal. But you also got to figure out exactly what you need to do to get it done, along with everything else that you have to do. So, managing your workload is one thing. Now, in my practice, people don't come to me because of fortune. It's the opposite, right? And so, if you are a compassionate and empathetic person, how do you deal with constantly having other people's issues on your plate? Sometimes that can be overwhelming. And I think that really what you just got to understand is experience is what you need to just understand, the reality of what you can and can't do, what's within, your power and what's not. And, if someone has an issue and you are compassionate, if there's nothing you can do about it, don't waste your time. It doesn't mean that you're not compassionate. It just means that you're not wasting time. And I put emphasis on waste because that's all it is if there's nothing you can do. When I first was a public defender, I was dealing with clients every day who had, traumatic lives. Their whole lives, they'd been dealing with trauma. And at first, I thought it was my job to improve their lives. So what you got to do is you got to understand, well, what's your actual mandate? No. I got appointed, get them the best result I can in their case. Okay. That's my job. I'm going to do everything I can to get the best result in their case. When I first started doing this work, I would, kind of take it home mentally every night. I'd lay in bed thinking about it. And then with experience, you realize that you just have to take your clients as they come to you. You are not responsible for a single thing that is brought to you. Okay. All you can do is make do with what you have. And you got to use your knowledge of the law and your command of the facts of the case, and your courtroom skills to really kind of marshal in the best result that anyone could get for this particular individual in this particular situation. So, a lot of the stress management is not just managing your caseload, but kind of managing your own expectations and your own understanding of what's within your power and what's not, and just focus on what you can do and don't waste time, worrying about what's outside of your power. No one's going to benefit from that. In fact, that'll only take away from time and energy you can spend benefiting other people in other ways.
And so, in the same lines of stress management, but a bit different. Before we started recording, you were telling us how you have a murder trial coming up soon. How does such sensitive and important topics, like that trial is life-changing for someone else, how do these important topics, like how do they affect your mindset and how you feel like on a daily basis, knowing you have such important things coming up and you're able to influence you yourself using your power, like your education and your job? You're in a situation where you can help someone a lot.
You just got to work hard. You work really hard. You got to take care of yourself. So I still got to go to the gym. I still have to eat healthy. I still have to sleep. If it feels like, I have so much work, I should stay later and keep working, you got to remind yourself that tomorrow you're going to feel awful and you're not going to be able to work for anybody. So you got to manage your life. But what you got to do is you got to work really hard. You have to know all the evidence in the case. You have to know everything that you have and everything the prosecutor has. And you have to, really put the time in to think about it, to think about how do you want to present this? What is it that I'm going to say? What can I say that is consistent with all the evidence and still allows me to argue that it means my client is not guilty? That's what you got to do for every case. So when you apply that to a murder case, a really high stakes case where Obviously, if you don't succeed, your client is going to suffer drastic consequences. All you can do is work hard, do your best, remind yourself that you couldn't do better. Hopefully, no one could do better. And the better you know your case, the more formidable you are as a lawyer, the more competitive you are, then the bigger the disadvantage for your adversary. In my case, it's prosecutor. Okay. Now, I am stressing about this particular case because murder cases are heavy. Like I said, the consequences for my client will be dire if things don't turn out well. What makes it even more stressful is I firmly believe that this is an innocent man. However, I also firmly believe that the evidence is really on our side. It's boggling my mind that the prosecutor is continuing to prosecute this case. And so I'm just remaining confident, knowing that with all the work that I put in this case, I believe I'm going to do a better job than the prosecutor will do. And if that works out the way I hope it work out, then I think the jury will rule in my favor.
Mm-hmm. So what about people like high schoolers who are like willing to put in this work? Where would you say they need to focus their work on? Whether that's communication skills or just studying the law, like where would you say they need to focus their like work on?
Sure. I think that what they need to do is go to college, for your college, right out of high school, and take a lot of different types of courses your freshman and sophomore year before you hone in on a major. Okay. Figure out what you like and what resonates with you. If you are so committed to going to law school, but you end up majoring in some sort of science, well, then maybe you should be a patent lawyer if you're still that committed to going to law school. Patent lawyers are basically required to have another degree in a science. So what you want to do is you want to, test the waters, figure out what works best for you. But you also want to get kind of a broad education to really expand your own understanding of everything that's applicable in real life. And then after college, the worst thing you can do is go right to law school. When I was in law school, the most annoying people were the people who went straight from high school to undergrad to law school. And the reason they were so annoying is because in law school, as you're learning about the law, so much of it has to do with how does it apply to everyday real life. Well, the people who've taken that route have never had the experience of having to work a full-time job, having to pay their own bills and take care of themselves. And I mean, even if you do have some people who've, put themselves through school and do know about financially taking care of themselves, they still lack a lot of the experience to which the law is really applicable. So my best advice is not to just go out and work, but to travel the world as much as you can. I don't just mean, take expensive vacations somewhere, get a job, earn your money, save it up, and go travel, through as many parts of the world as you can, get to know as many types of people as you can, broaden your understanding of people, of human beings, because that real broad understanding and focus is always going to be helpful in a practice of law. I can't emphasize enough how much just going out in the world and understanding different types of people really helps you in this job. It helps you understand things that you can explain certain ways. You can represent your client better because you might not know exactly what your client's life is like, but you can explain things in ways that other people wouldn't normally understand. You can bridge gaps that couldn't be bridged without that experience. So it's not just taking diverse courses in college. It's really getting out in the real world and getting to know as broad of an array of people as you can. And then just to boot, once you go to law school, again, if you know what type of law you want to practice, all power to you. But, I suggest everyone going to law school with an open mind.
Hmm. Yeah. So if someone's trying to do like extracurricular activities, let's say, so would you say, like if they don't know for sure if they want to go to law, what do you think is a good extracurricular to try out and see what you enjoy?
For a high school student,
Yeah.
you mean like an extracurricular, like something provided by the school, or are you talking about like, going out of the high school scene and getting your own experience? What do you mean?
Yeah, just like how could they get involved and get more experience? Because thinking about law in high school is kind of tough because high schoolers don't really have as much experience as they can get. Suppose if they're going to computer science, there's like computer science courses and stuff, but law doesn't have that much of an aspect within like school. So how would you say they can get involved in a young age, like high school?
Sure. I would call your county's public defender office and just cold call and see if they have any programs for teens, any internship opportunities. Start with the public defender's office or start with the district attorney's office. Let me be clear. I practice criminal defense and I could never see myself being a prosecutor, but not all prosecutors are inherently bad. Some are, but not all. And a lot of good defense attorneys got their first experience as a district attorney. So contact the prosecutors or a public defender's office. You're right in the nitty gritty in both of those offices. So you get great experience and you get a very good kind of first level perspective on the practice of criminal defense. Okay. So that'd be a good entree. And then, I don't know what county you guys live in. Public defender's offices are all county by county. And so if your county doesn't have a public defender's office or doesn't have they don't have an internship program, just cold call some attorneys. Ask all your friends, whose parents are attorneys. Ask them for advice. But really getting into a law office somehow is great exposure, and if it just consists of going in there to shred documents, as long as you're not stuck in a back room, as long as there's somewhere where you can listen to conversations and understand what kind of stuff they deal with, that's good experience, good exposure. It might be a totally boring office you're in. It might not be the kind that you're going to want to end up doing full time when you get older, but just the exposure is good. Having a attorney you can ask questions of, having just someone whose brain you can pick to get an understanding of like what do they deal with and what makes a lawyer's mind different from anyone else's mind when you're approaching these kind of issues. You know what I mean? Like what is it about law school and legal training that makes it required to do this kind of work?
That's actually a very insightful information because I'm sure a lot of high school students would want to figure out what to do outside of school to really move forward in doing something in the field of law. So how has it been running your own law firm? Just wondering.
Well, it's been a trip. How's that for an answer? I am much happier in private practice than I was as a public defender, and that's not a ding on public defense. It's just my personality. I just like being my own boss and kind of prefer the smaller, intimate setting of a small law office to a big one. The biggest challenge has been it's not business development or the work, it's the balance. How do you do both? How do you run a financially successful law practice without compromising your integrity and your commitment to your clients? Let me give you two examples, okay? You have a spectrum, and on one side of the spectrum is a type of law firm that is very heavy on marketing, signs up a lot of new clients, but they're more concerned with making money than they are with getting good results. I'm not going to name anyone because I'm speaking kind of hypothetically. That's like an extreme end of one spectrum. Like I said, some firms are very good with marketing and they can sign up people very easily. But once that person's a client, their case can be assigned to someone who it turns out has very little experience, right? And that lawyer's working there. They want to get experience. That lawyer without experience gets hired because their boss can pay them very little. And this person gets handed a case and is told to get it dealt with. Not just deal it, but deal it quickly, because a lawyer can only handle so many cases at once, right? So a lot of firms put emphasis on resolving their clients' cases because they want to get rid of cases as quickly as they want to bring new cases in. They always want to bring a lot of new cases in because that's how they make the money. Okay, that's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is the lawyer who is so committed to criminal defense that they've basically taken a vow of poverty. This person is so committed to criminal defense that they can't find the time to deal with their bills, to actually send out bills, pay bills. So this is a lawyer who's very knowledgeable, very compassionate, and is never going to compromise their integrity for money. But oftentimes that lawyer will fall into debt. They fall into debt because they don't collect their fees as well as they should. They don't pay their bills as much as they should. They don't have enough money to do what they're supposed to do. So the best criminal defense attorneys are those who strike the perfect balance. How do you strike the perfect balance? Business development and administration versus doing a good job for your clients. So that requires time management and resources. You got to have the resources to get the work done. You have enough lawyers working in your firm, or are you taking this all on yourself? If you're taking it all on yourself, then you have to limit your caseload. Otherwise, you're going to go crazy just doing your cases. Forget about the administration part. That just falls by the wayside. So one trick is you want to bring in high-paying clients, okay? For a few reasons. The high-paying clients puts less pressure on to bring in more cases, okay? But it also allows you more flexibility. And with that flexibility, you have more time you can commit to lower-paying clients. So you also want to strike a balance between the different types of income amongst your clients. I also take appointed cases. Appointed cases come along when the public defender can't accept representation of one client because there's a conflict of interest. Maybe they represent a witness in that case, or they have represented a witness in that case, or they represent a co-defendant. For various reasons, they don't take certain cases. So I'm on a panel of attorneys that the court appoints to represent clients who would otherwise qualify for a public defender. I'm committed to always taking those clients. That's kind of like the public defender in me, even though I don't want to necessarily be part of a public defender's office. I'm still committed to representing indigent people. But I also want a good income. I live in an expensive city. I have a child. You know what I mean? I want to live comfortably. I want my family to live comfortably. My daughter just graduated from a public elementary school last year and just started a private middle school. So I got that to take care of. So you have all these competing interests, and you really have to just figure out how to manage it. So that's time management, case management, client management. And like I said earlier, you got to take care of yourself. You got to make room, make time to stay fit, stay healthy, and get good rest. And hang out with your friends and family. Be happy.
Yeah. So as you were saying, like all these qualities that like make a good lawyer or make like a not too great lawyer, how could a high schooler like work on these qualities themselves?
Well, just start thinking about what I said, okay, in terms of time management, work management. I mean, what do you guys have to do? What high school do you guys go to?
I live in Pleasanton, Alameda
Okay.
County, and then Praneeth lives in Arizona.
Okay. What year are you guys right now?
I'm a freshman.
Okay.
He's a sophomore.
So how many classes are you taking?
6.
6 classes. Okay. I graduated from high school 28 years ago. So I don't entirely remember what it's like. And I also just wasn't good at doing my homework back then. But, you know, how does it apply to a high schooler? Well, what do you want to do on any given day? What do you want to do, and what are your obligations? Okay, you got to take care of certain things, and you want to take care of them in a way that allows you to get to other things you want to do, like just hanging out with your friends or doing whatever. So, you got to use your experience, apply your experience to figure out how much time and energy every task is going to take. You got to kind of estimate how much time you're going to put into something. Now, what's really important is that you always have to be committed to a good result. Okay, more than just sticking with the schedule. So sometimes you're actually in the heat of the work, and it's taking a lot longer than you expected. Well, that's for me. That's the time when hanging out with my friends might get cut out of the schedule today. Okay. But you got to basically always keep a good list of everything you got to do, a task list, a to-do list, across the board for all your cases, but also your personal life. And you got to manage it. Make sure everything gets done when it's supposed to get done. Do whatever you have to do to make sure that happens. Like I said, set reminders on your, computer or your phone. Keep a calendar. Calendars are very important. So calendars and task lists. And then, for me, all my work really is preparing for some sort of hearing. Okay. In criminal defense, one thing I learned at the outset of my career is that, even though the vast majority of cases don't go to trial, they settle by some sort of deal. The best results are only going to come if you start preparing for trial as soon as you open up a case file. All right. And so you're constantly preparing to present your case, to present your evidence, or to fight against their evidence. And so you got to keep track of when those hearings are, which hearings are around the corner. I mean, obviously that dictates how I prioritize certain work. I may be way more interested in one case, but that trial is not for 6 months, and I got another case on for trial next month. So sometimes you just got to set aside what you're more interested in and focus on getting everything done. Okay, so calendar management, time management, caseload management, and just figuring out everything that you personally need to do to make sure it all gets done the right way.
So to talk about your work life right now, given your diverse experience in criminal defense cases, how do you approach the difference in representing clients accused of crime, or how diverse is the landscape of clients you get?
No, so I just enjoy criminal defense generally. Okay, and so I take I am willing to take any case where the government has charged someone with a crime. Okay, be it a misdemeanor or a felony, low-level felony, high-level misdemeanor, vice versa. And it's kind of the same approach that you bring to all these. Now, obviously, some cases are going to stress you out more than others based on either the complexity or the stakes or a combination, or sometimes just the client. Some clients are just more stressful than others. But I enjoy taking all types of cases. Additionally, there are some misdemeanors that are relatively easy to kind of facilitate to a good result and that pay well. So, there's no case for which I'm too good.
Yeah,
So,
I totally understand what you're saying. Yeah.
I was just curious, when clients would want to reach you, how would they, what is the process for them to reach you? And how would they go about trying to reach your firm for you to represent them?
Thanks. So generally speaking, clients find me usually one of two ways. Through my website. Okay. So my search engine optimization is very important to my marketing, but also through word of mouth and reputation. So if someone finds me on my website, they can always contact my firm through any of the contact information there. There's an email address available. There's a text box in which they can type a direct message to my firm, or they can just call us. We have someone who's going to answer the phone 24 hours a day. So even if the office is closed, the answering service is on. Okay. So we take phone messages, we take emails. When someone learns about me through personal referrals, then they contact me however they get my information. If it's through a common friend, they'll call my personal cell phone. Depending on certain circumstances, I may ask them to just use my work phone from now on. However anyone hears about me, there's usually some contact information available, and all that works.
Yeah, so in this like area of like having your own law firm, this is like a really big step. So what skills or what like tips would you have for someone who wants to run their own business, whether that's in law or in any other field? Because most business skills I'm assuming, are like cross career, like cross field, right? Like they can apply to many different fields.
Yeah, sure. I'll just say off the bat, I'm definitely not the best person to ask this from. I mean, I haven't perfected that perfect balance I talked about earlier. I'm still working on that. But what I'd say is really important is, in terms of the business aspect, you got to remember customer service. When you're a public defender, you get appointed to be the person's attorney. They don't get to pick and choose. And part of your job as a lawyer, part of your job is to tell your client the hard truths. And sometimes that's much easier for a public defender because private attorneys often feel a need to keep their clients happy, right? That pressure is less with a public defender who's, going to get paid no matter what. And I don't mean less in that they don't have to work as hard to get a good result. I'm just saying sometimes it's a little easier to be more blunt with your client about this is what you're facing. This is what's likely to happen when you don't have to worry about keeping them happy. And that's, that's what a good lawyer does. So props to all public defenders who do that. But you do have to keep customer service in mind when you're in private practice, no matter what. You do want to make sure that people are happy. As a lawyer, you do have a duty to tell those hard truths. So you got to be, sometimes you got to finesse it a little more. You got to be a little more suave in how you convey it, Sometimes you don't just drop a bomb, you ease into them. But you always got to treat people with respect no matter what. So respect is a fundamental necessity, I think, of any business. Sometimes if a businessman is a jerk, maybe I can look past it if I want his product bad enough. But if I can get the same product from someone who's not a jerk, then obviously that's the deal breaker, right? Well, I personally think I'm a really good lawyer, so I don't know if someone can get the same defense, but that's also my opinion, not theirs, and they're the ones making the decision. So you do want to keep them happy in that regard and just stay respectful. You also, got to, like I said, you got to have good organizational management. So keep track of, who owes you what, know how to collect, make sure for certain things you get paid up front. Because let's face it, in this line of work, sometimes you come across people who don't have the most integrity or honesty, and you do have to collect your fee up front. It's always important also. I think it's always important to remember that lawyers oftentimes don't have a good reputation. So just be aware of that. Just be aware of what the clients may be thinking. Don't necessarily substitute your thinking for theirs, but just use that common sense, the same kind of common sense that you get from just living life, going out in the real world and working, traveling throughout the world and meeting people. You get a sense of what's on people's minds. And we all know that lawyers oftentimes get bad reputations. So when it comes to fees, when it comes to, being somewhat stern about the fact that you need to get paid, you got to remind people that, this is your livelihood. This is how you take care of your family. You're not stingy, but you have bills to pay, and you can't do that unless your clients pay you. It's also really important that they realize, what is it that they're getting from you? A lot of people will call me and, they'll want to start talking about their case right away. And, I love talking cases. So sometimes I just go along with it and they end up getting free advice. What you always got to remember when you're talking to a lawyer is that a lawyer's stock and trade is our time and our advice. Courtroom representation is just one part of that. And that, can be considered time. So you got to, whenever you call a lawyer, you got to remember that, lawyers need an income as much as anyone else needs an income. And that's why you need to respect why lawyers bill for what they bill. At the same time, I think every good lawyer should be willing to cut some corners when it comes to that kind of stuff. So it's not uncommon that someone calls me and we just get into a conversation and I end up just giving them some free advice if it's simple enough. And I'll tell them, don't bother paying an attorney for that. Okay?
So far, in being a lawyer, looking back on your career so far, what has been the most rewarding aspect of your work, and what do you achieve? What do you hope to achieve in the future with your law firm?
Let me do that in reverse order. So what I hope to achieve in the future is a robust practice that's lucrative, where my clients get a very good defense. You can't always promise a good result. But here's the other thing. You also got to understand that results are to be judged on a case-by-case circumstance, okay? Sometimes, no client likes going to prison. But if you're going to prison for 2 years when you were looking at 30, that's a good deal, right? So is it a good result? Sometimes, you got to base that. Is the client happy with it? But there's times where a client's just not going to be happy with it. And you got to remember that that's a good result. So I want to have a good practice that, low stress, lucrative, that gets good results. What was remind me the first part of the question?
Looking back on your career so far, what has been the most rewarding aspect of your career?
So the most rewarding aspect, I'd say two things. One, the actual results. When you accomplish exactly what you're hoping to accomplish in court is always a good result. The more work you put into it, the better the result feels. Okay. So the greatest feeling in criminal law is to win a jury trial. Sometimes you can win cases without having to go all the way to jury trial, however. The most rewarding parts of the practice have been the results. I can't overlook the fact that sometimes when you get these results, your clients really, really, truly benefit. It's not just because they stay out of prison. It's because, they get a second chance at things. They get an opportunity to do things over. And so it's always nice, years later when you see a client and they're thriving. When you first met them, they were in a really bad situation. I don't try to be a savior necessarily, but it is a good feeling when you think about the fact that, if that hadn't gone well, they wouldn't be in this good situation today. And just to know that, you got to be part of their success along their journey, that's always a good feeling.
Okay, Mr. Hallinan, thank you so much for coming on our podcast, and I think that's it. But yeah, thank you so much for your time and coming and giving such important advice.
All right, it's been a pleasure talking to you guys. I wish you guys both the best.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and good luck with your trial.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Call anytime you guys ever have any questions. Talk to you later.
All right. Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, what a great conversation. Mr. Hallinan's journey from a public defender to running his own law firm is truly inspiring, and his insights into the legal profession have given us a lot to think about.
Definitely, Arav. His experience really highlights the importance of resilience, adaptability, and a genuine commitment to standing up for what's right. It was really fascinating to hear about his work in the courtroom and the lessons he learned along the way.
We hope you all enjoyed this episode and got some valuable advice, especially if you're thinking about pursuing a career in law. If you did, make sure to subscribe to Professional Perspectives and leave us a review. Share it with your friends, especially those who might be interested in the legal field.
And as always, we have many more great conversations lined up, so be sure to stay tuned for our next episode. Thanks again to Neil Hallinan for joining us, and thank you to our listeners for tuning in.
That's it for today, everyone. Keep learning, stay curious, and we'll see you next time on Professional Perspectives.